decades of being dismissed and marginalised and gaslit, being told, be quiet, don't speak up, you're wrong, it's actually started to cause self-doubt. Am I crazy? Am I right? Maybe I'm overthinking this. I should just be quiet. How can a patient have autonomy if there's a power imbalance?
It's a lot in one go, but I have Kringoudis as a surname, so...
Well, my middle name's Tuscany, so Ariella Heffernan-Marks.
You've just introduced yourself for me. Ariella, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's all good.
You are the founder of Ovum AI.
Yes.
And you have a background in medicine, but I want to hear the story because obviously there's always a story.
Always a story.
And how do we get to this point of launching such an amazing platform which is helping and will help so many people, especially after this podcast today?
Well, it's nearly been close to 4 years, which is crazy. It seems like so much has happened, but it's also gone so quickly. So I guess where the idea for Ovum, if we can start there, was in my third year of medical school. I began to suffer with chronic vestibular migraines. So that means you're kind of going through dizziness, photophobia, so really struggling with light. I had a lot of facial pain. So for me, I was struggling to look at lecture screens. I was struggling to stand up in clinical placements, and med school's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
But even as a very health literate young woman, I was struggling to get the care that I needed. Many doctors said it's anxiety, it's because you've moved states, it's because you're doing medicine, meditate, do all these things. Of course, I'm trying that, but I don't want to take medication, but I need it. I'm really, really struggling. And at the same time, it was COVID. So usually we would go on international placements, but actually because of COVID, we were going between regional, remote, metropolitan hospitals, primary care. So I was in ED and ward-based settings as well. And what I realised both as a patient and as a doctor was that our healthcare system was broken when it came to women's health, and that actually women were completely disempowered with their healthcare regardless of socioeconomic status. I began to really stop and reflect and look around me, and it was amazing what I actually began to see from a patient perspective. It's so different when you're there just as a doctor without that experience of chronic health. And what I saw was that women were fearful of the healthcare system. So they had decades of being dismissed and marginalised and gaslit, that they were going to social media or family and friends, and I'm a victim of doing that as well, instead of their healthcare provider. And this was leading to lower health literacy and this rise in chronic health conditions. So in Australia, 56% of Australian women over 15 already have at least one chronic health condition. And by 65, that's 87%. And then prior to medicine, I'd done law science with a focus on reproductive biology, which is how I fell in love with women's health. That allowed me to really understand the physiology of women and that we're cyclical and we're integrated. You can't have a siloed healthcare system when it comes to women's health. And I looked around and was like, that's exactly what we've got. It's fragmented. How are we meant to be putting together all these diagnostic patterns? And then I looked at diagnostic times for women, whether that was general health, like general conditions, or endometriosis is probably most well known in the media. It's 7 to 12 years. And I thought that's just not good enough for something that impacts women so greatly. And then thirdly, I began to learn about this research gap, which is the fact that women had not been equally represented in clinical trials for decades. And as a young woman in medical school, it's quite shocking to think, wait, I've been trained to only recognise how conditions present in white men, but not in women, not even in myself. When I started to see all these problems, and at this point, the gender health gap report hadn't come out yet, which I can talk to in a minute, I was driving my way to medical school and I actually had that light bulb moment. I really did. And I can still feel myself sitting in the car and being like, if we have a book that tracks children's development over time, like the Blue Book in New South Wales, then why don't we have something like that for women that integrates all of their health data, empowers them with that information so they can advocate for themselves? We achieve shared decision making, which we know leads to better engagement in preventative health, which leads to better improved health outcomes. But at the same time, we collect that data and we feed that back into research. And that was where the concept of Ovum was born. And actually Ovum was one of the first names I had.
It's very interesting when there's that idea that you just had that knowing. We have lots of ideas. We test lots of things out. Is that what I'm hearing? You were just like, I have to do this.
Yeah. And maybe I'd had one business before. It was more about creatives and creating a space for creatives during law school. So I had obviously a business mindset, but I didn't have in my mind that I would be an entrepreneur. little did I know I'd be a tech entrepreneur in AI. But it was that kind of gut, and I do talk about this a lot, is intuition. I'm a big advocate for intuition in business, but also for women's health, and we can get into that in a moment. But it was that kind of such a strong feeling. And I remember thinking to myself, wait, is this what I'm going to do with the rest of my life? And something was like, yes, but you're also crazy. Like, you're in the middle of med school. You've worked your ass off to get here. What are you doing? And then how are you going to do this? Like, you have no commercial background. You have no tech background. Like, how are you going to integrate systems? Like, the government even haven't been able to do that with my health record. So how the hell are you going to do it? But it was just this like internal push that this was something big.
Before we go any further, explain what Ovum AI looks like today.
Ovum is the first AI health partner for women. So it's for every woman at every stage of her lifespan. It's an app in her pocket. We like to say it's a personal health ally that she can access whenever she needs. So I like to always run through a case example because I think that's the best way of understanding this product, because it is a completely new way of tracking, capturing, and visualizing health data. So if we take 45-year-old Isabel, who's going through perimenopause, often she's dealing with really individual symptoms. She's going to various healthcare providers. She's going to family and friends, social media, and getting not necessarily the answers that she needs. And it can be really overwhelming and really isolating. But she can download Ovum and is met with this really personalized and compassionate onboarding experience where Ovum will get to know her and her whole health journey. And so she already feels more listened to and heard than she probably has in any clinical appointment. Then it will guide her through the various features that are on offer, which will all be personalized to her because of this longitudinal memory that we're building that's all based off her health journey. It could be integrating medical reports, integrating wearable data, so that's anything, any wearable data that you might have, whether it's Aura or Whoop or Garmin. Generalized symptom tracking, medication appointment tracking, and all reproductive health tracking. So that's cycles, pregnancy, fertility, perimenopause, and menopause. And it will bring that all together in a really easy and accessible way, but also in a beautiful way. Our design is very women-specific and aesthetic. So you definitely need to check out the app and how it looks. And it will use that to build this memory to provide her with really context-specific, personalized insights about her health so she can advocate for herself. What it also does is creates reports that she can share with her doctor to help in that communication, because it can be scary. And sometimes just having the notes there, whether that's a trigger or whether it's something you can just send to your doctor beforehand so you don't even have to maybe start that conversation, I think is a really powerful tool. And we've already got 3 women's health clinics with doctors being trained to accept those reports. And we hope to continue to see more Ovum-supported clinics. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell for the individual woman. What Isabel can also do is consent to have that data captured as part of our research bank. And it's all anonymous, encrypted, and aggregated. But we are trying to collect the largest women's health longitudinal data set to feed back into addressing the research bias, but also the bias in artificial intelligence. Because part of that bias that we see in AI is because our global data sets are skewed and are biased. So we need to begin to collect large longitudinal data sets to feed back into those global data sets to impact AI at the end of the day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Like such a missing piece of the puzzle. I spent a lot of time helping health professionals with their entrepreneur part of themselves, which is pretty minimal for most health providers. You sign up to be a doctor. You don't sign up to be, well, most doctors don't sign up to be anything else because that's a big job in itself. How has that been for you pivoting, or maybe not even pivoting, maybe it's actually integrating that entrepreneur side? And I joke about it. It's like doctors suck at that side of it. It's not their fault. It's just not the way that most are wired.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would say, as I said before, it was never something that I'd thought about. It's kind of just happened. But the more that I delved into it, the more I realized I was supposed to be this version of a doctor. I think it goes back to actually suffering from chronic illness, which actually broke down my ego, broke down this expected pathway of what a doctor looked like and what being a clinician really was. It made me realize, well, maybe this specific pathway of being in the hospital system with crazy hours, not eating enough, not drinking enough, is really not aligned to my health and wellness, especially with chronic migraine. It's like probably the worst. And it really gave me the space and opportunity to look around me and then welcome in the intuition to say, how can I be a doctor in a different way? And then because I'd had this chronic issue, which made me kind of more open to exploration and adventure, and actually talk about this on my own podcast with Michelle Irving, who's a big advocate for chronic illness at work, is I'd gone through this kind of identity transformation, which I think is half of the issue with doctors getting stuck in just one pathway of medicine, is you have this like kind of ego around what it means to be a doctor. It's getting into the top college and, having all the doctors above you, see you in a certain light, but actually the world's so much bigger than that. And you can have so much more impact on populations beyond just the hospital system. But anyway, we talk about authentic leadership. And usually that comes from going through a chronic illness that strips you back, and you have to re-identify yourself, and you have to come back into the workplace setting in a completely different way and look at the world differently. And that's what kind of happened to me and allowed me to go into this journey with authentic leadership and pure willingness to embrace anything new in what it meant to be a clinical entrepreneur, if we'll call it. But I wasn't calling myself that at the time. So it started off just learning. So I did the New South Wales commercialization course on focusing on how you commercialize a software as a medical device. 3-day course. It runs you through what's an investor, what are the types of investors, regulation within Australia and globally, like where do you even go to find a developer? Do you have to do it in Australia or outside of Australia? And that's actually how I met the venture studio. I have now worked with it for 3 years in autonomy, who supported me, through medical school, through internship to get Ovum to where it is. But at the same time, it was, speaking to doctors and understanding, well, are you happy in this trajectory? And kind of validating, like, do I stay in this path or do I go into this entrepreneurship path? And, this was started in my 3rd year, but I still got through 4th year and internship. And it was still experiencing both worlds. I was learning both worlds. And by the end of internship, traction was building with Ovum. I'd already raised a bit of money. I could see the impact I was going to have. And I made the decision I was going to go full time. That was beginning of last year. But what I did do, which I would advise any clinician, I guess, making that transition, is I got a business coach. And I had gone to this kind of networking event, which was around how do we build the American kind of San Fran ecosystem and startup ecosystem here. And what a lot of the founders were saying was everyone there has a business coach. And I was like, well, this is going to be a big transition for me. I'm going from 10 years of structure and like everything's planned out for me to now nothing's planned out for me. Everything is up to me completely. And so I should have someone to help me, even though I'm organized, even though I'm disciplined. And so that was really, I think, one of the smartest things I did. And I still work with her today. In medicine specifically, you're used to this kind of consistent performance and reward. It's almost like a dopamine hit. In entrepreneurship, like you just need to keep going. There's not someone giving you a mark or saying you might get told you're doing very well, but you have to keep going. And I think you need to find that rhythm for yourself. And it can be quite challenging when you come from a career like law or medicine with constant assessments and constant structure. So I think that was kind of my biggest thing. And everyone's different. But I also say, and I have spoken a lot at the OzCEP, which is at the College for Clinical Entrepreneurship, I speak around the fact that actually doctors, our portfolio that we get assessed on over 4 years is around our communication skills, our team and leadership skills, our ability to identify a problem and solve it, whether that's like clinical presentation, and looking at the evidence and making empirical decisions, so research. Those characteristics are perfect for a startup entrepreneur because that is literally what you're doing. So in so many ways, your training in medical school aligns you to be a really good entrepreneur and I would say CEO. And I found all of those skills that I've learned in medical school have been so transferable to me as a founder, especially when it comes to presenting and talking and being very clear about what I set out to do and even how I answer questions. Because even from clinical interviews, you're practicing how you answer questions all the time. You're in the middle of a surgery and you'll be drilled in the middle of that surgery and you need to think on the spot and impress that registrar or that consultant. So yeah, and I also say actually the high pressure environment and time managing a million things and being able to keep your cool. And I can say, like, especially after launching 8 weeks ago, it's like a whirlwind and it's, going from product to company. That's like a whole transition period. And now we've got a team of 5. I need to be the founder and the leader who keeps my calm amongst the chaos. What better career to learn that from other than medicine?
With the practitioners that you have so far on board, is it practitioners or is it actually groups of medical centres. I don't know when you touched on that did you say three?
Yeah. So we have 3 women's health clinics. But then we also have our advisory board of clinicians, and I have my supervisors part of my PhD.
And how has that been, being able to get them on board? Because I feel the hard part is that there is still somewhat an old school approach. I think that's maybe what it is, and it's not at all integrative when it comes to, and again, why women feel like they're not heard, that everyone's operating in silos, that they can't be themselves, or they're afraid to ask questions. Is there a criteria? How do you come up with these clinics? Because I feel like there needs to be a certain type of ethos.
So there's 2 parts to this. Firstly, I like to say that Ovum should become a vetting tool. So if you go to your doctor and you've spent the time going through all of our onboarding, which goes through all of your past medical history, your screening, your mental health, your sexual health, your sleep, everything about you, and then you've tracked your health, you've put in your health goals, you've put your medications and appointments, and you've created this 200-word report that doctors can read very quickly, and they won't even look at it, I think there's a bit of a sign that they're not the right doctor. And there's a mix of doctors. There's this spectrum. And there are an amazing pool of doctors that are very forward-thinking, that will work with you, that are supportive of women's health, that are accepting of technology. And they're who you need to find. What I'm trying to do through these Ovum-supported clinics is help women be guided a little bit easier to that process. But actually, these 3 clinics, the doctors reached out to me, whether that was through Instagram or digital health festivals, saying, this is amazing, we would love this in our clinic. And so automatically it's like, the fact that you've reached out to me, you're the right people, because this is also a learning period. How do we best do this with doctors? How do we teach them in the best way where they're already time poor, and show them that actually this is actually a resource to save time, a resource to reduce administrative burden and help with time for empathy, compassion and intuition, and actually shared decision making, which is better for your patient and therefore better for you. This is actually what we're doing at the moment with the advisory board as well of clinicians who have a mixture of women's health specialists, but also endocrinologists and gen med physicians who are working on tailoring these reports more specifically for different personas so that it improves that communication with the doctors. We're getting the doctors to give us direct feedback from these clinical interactions, but we're also offering women who attend these clinics and are accessing Ovum extended free trials, of Ovum, to really just enhance this kind of relationship building at the moment and nurturing this process. Eventually, we'd love to see a dashboard that we would create, which the doctor would be able to open up very quickly, have a quick look, and then jump into the clinical appointment. And so working with clinics to build that. We're also looking at building in-app transcription. That was actually, doctors asked for that. They're like, oh, women come and record their appointments all the time. Why don't you just have that in the app? And I was like, oh, would you feel comfortable with that? Like, sure, if they asked. I was like, okay, great, fantastic, because we have a lot of transcription tools for doctors. What about for the patient? And I guess the other question always comes back to, shouldn't this be like a tool for the doctors? And I was like, well, I think we have quite a few tools for the doctors. I think this is about time we have a tool for the women and for the men at some point. I think there's stigma equally for men that they're battling within the healthcare system. That's kind of how I'm, seeing it right now. We've also partnered with the Royal Hospital for Women's Foundation. So as well as our clinical trials that we're running there at the moment, we are now offering a pay it forward model. So women can subsidise or double their subscription to pay it forward to women from priority populations who can't afford it. Because at the end of the day, this should be a tool that's accessible to every woman everywhere. And we want data sets that are representative of not only a very small percentage of the population. And so now we're having doctors in clinics distributing Ovum for free for women that they deem need it in a free capacity.
But whilst it's an amazing tool for the medical provider, it's equally going to help, I think, to somewhat take the stress out of it for the app user or the woman, just in the sense of having or feeling more empowered because they're going to have more information. I also imagine it will actually allow for you to sit with your health provider and have more time discussing what needs to be discussed, because at best often you have, depends on the type of doctor that you're seeing, but you might have 15, 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that this will actually help to fast track a lot of what is primarily discussed in an appointment.
Exactly. That's what I hope, because if you think about it, if it's the first appointment with that doctor, they're going to gather all that information that we've already gathered through what you've talked about with Ovum, and we do that within 3 minutes through AI. But in a clinical appointment, that could take 7 minutes of that 15 minutes. And then, and this is, I've done a lot of customer validation, spoken to hundreds of women, plus now the PhDs. Often women leave and feel like they haven't even asked the question they went there for. Or if they've mentioned one thing, it's been shut down and the conversation's redirected. So what I hope is it actually highlights to the doctor, this is what really matters to her. And yes, I'm going to take my own history. I don't expect them to only use the ovum report, but it's more of okay, this is what's been really pressing to her. We'll touch on, I think this is what we need to touch on, but I need to make sure I touch on that. Because even in medical school, we are trained that the history part of your whole history and exam is the most important. Actually, it's the end of the bed assessment. How does that patient look? Beyond the results, how does that patient look? Do they look unwell or not well? And what are they telling you? Listen. Because usually you can find out what's going on if you just listen to what they're going to say, because they'll focus, whatever the most prominent or, impactful thing in their life is probably linked to what's going on in some capacity. And so I hope Ovum allows that. And touching back on the intuition piece is what I hope Ovum does is allows them to feel comfortable again listening to that intuition, because we are biologically trained to have an intuition, right? And I think you listen to a lot of women's stories, and every woman has a story, is I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong, but I was told that it wasn't. And that was the same. I had that story, and every woman I've had on my podcast has that story, every woman I meet. I think that what's happened is because women have been silenced in, I think not just in the healthcare system, in a lot of industries, being told, be quiet, don't speak up, you're wrong, or you're hysterical, you're anxious. It's actually started to cause self-doubt. Am I crazy? Like, am I right? Is this, maybe I'm overthinking this, I should just be quiet. What I'm hoping is Ovum gives them that information, like you said, to say, actually, no, like, I'm validated. This is actually something I should bring up. And Ovum won't diagnose you, but it will give you the information that you can ask the question. And I think that's what I hope it does, is give women their voices back.
I think the other challenge too, and where I see this bridging a gap, is often we go to the wrong provider for the advice that we need. So I see this a lot in clinic, where patients will go and they will see their GP for something they should see their gynecologist for, or see their gynecologist for something they should see their endocrinologist for. To your point, everyone's operating in silos. Nobody's bridging the gaps and linking that together. And I think that is a challenge both from the medical system, because it's just the way that it is. And the woman walking out of her GP appointment going, I'm none the wiser, I haven't gotten answers. I have a lot of patients who will say, well, why won't my doctor run these tests for me? And I'll say, if you came to me, and our clinic is women's health, if you came to me and you asked me to run a test that was outside of women's health, sure, I can run it, but I don't know what, it's not my specialty to help you in that area. So therefore, it's your doctor's job to help you. At the end of the day, they want to help you. It's just, again, it's the system. It's not anyone necessarily trying to do you a disservice.
Exactly.
But it's more about having the right person or the right eyes on your situation. And I can see how this might actually help with that as well.
Yeah, so it does. And it does guide you on the right type of provider. In fact, from a clinical governance perspective, we've trained Ovum to always refer to the right allied health or the right GP or the right specialist. That's part of ensuring that women are not treating Ovum like a doctor, because it's not a doctor. It's there to give you the information. I always like to say it's almost like the doctor has a receptionist and this is your receptionist. It just gives you the information and helps you get where you need to go. But what it will do, I guess, from an appointment perspective, is it will, if you do have an appointment of whatever kind, it will check in with you a day before and will help you prepare for that appointment. It will give you a list of questions. It may also say, well, you should ask for a referral to this specialist. And so that can give you the information to then ask that GP, because usually the primary care provider is the one that's giving the referral to that specialist. It can help you just get to that faster, as you said. And then it will also check in with you 2 hours after your appointment to make sure that you're uploading all of the documents. Usually you'll get a scribbly piece of paper from your doctor, so you can take a photo of that and it will read those scribbles and actually create a plan for you that you can enact, and it will help you set that all up in your app. And now in the next week, we should have, you can do user-generated reminders anywhere, anytime about anything. So you can just ask the AI, I want a reminder about checking in to drink water 5 times a day, and it will do that for you. I want you to remind me to get some sunlight. Or if you're intention setting with Ovum, so we can talk about the wellness side of what it does, It will help you plan about how in your day you can actually reach that intention. It will give you strategies, and you could set reminders to actually enact those throughout your day. So that's another exciting part, but that can also come into appointments and things as well.
Changing gears slightly.
Sure.
You had an experience as a patient that opened up your eyes to this being something that was necessary. How is it, or why is it, do you think, that happened in the first place? As in, you were going to a medical appointment, you were trying to seek answers, and as the patient now, you saw a different side to that. How do you think we got to that point of, I don't know what the right word is, but there is this segment between patient and practitioner. I don't want to use the word arrogance, but it kind of feels as a patient a little bit arrogant.
I mean, do doctors have egos? Yeah. I think there has to be like an element of it. It's like such a competitive and hard environment. Even if you go in with, not being egocentric or narcissistic, there's an element where to get through you have to be. It is a bit like that. But I think you can do that with empathy and compassion. I think there is a patient-doctor relationship, and there is this authority. And I think that's what you're feeling, whether that's some doctors might have ego, some may be on more authoritative in their approach. This might be generalization. I don't think every single doctor you're going to have that. My integrative GP is incredible. The first time I saw her, when I was dealing with the array of symptoms I was dealing with, was just insane, because it ended up being a mixture of it ended up being functional anxiety on top, because I wasn't getting the treatment I needed. She spent 3 hours of me just talking and listening. So I don't want to say all doctors are like that, but in this setting, I think that there is an element of, you're told you're the top 1% of the 1%. You've worked really hard to get there, and there is a bit of God complex. And in specific specialties, there can be as well, more than others.
I feel like, sorry to cut you off, but I feel like if that was just slightly somehow, and I don't know how, because I get all of that, or even having these conversations and making practitioners aware of how they might come across.
Yes, I think
I think that's maybe the conversation. I think patients would be far more open and not like a deer in headlights. I can't tell you the amount of women that I speak to, they say, I forgot, I'll say, did you ask X, Y, and Z? Yes. They'll say, nah. I completely forgot. I just was like, it's the anxiety. Or the patient that will say, oh my goodness, my blood results are for, cortisol and whatever, which is nor here nor there. But anyway,
point being is cortisol intolerance. That was part of, I was 3 times the upper limit.
Right. But that was only on that one day, because why? You hate going to the doctor and you hate having blood tests, I just like that we can have the conversation and shine a light on it.
Yeah.
And I think that if we could just have that, I think softening it slightly might be, and also, but empowering women as well. It's kind of like we have to meet in the middle somewhere.
Exactly. And that's what I talk about. And I actually use this. This is what Ovum's trying to do, is it's shared decision making. And we actually get taught about it in medical school. It's part of our kind of ethical approach to doing no harm, is autonomy. How can a patient have autonomy if there's a power imbalance? That's ethics 101, right? The problem is then in the actual appointment, that's not always translated. And I think, as you pointed to, is I don't think doctors are there to do harm. They're really there to help. But whether that's the system, is what you talked about, is all burning down that emotional capacity, which is probably a large part of it, the administrative burden, especially in primary care, the KPIs around actually they need to hit X amount of patients with X amount of time. Or in ED, it's the same thing, that are affecting this, where doctors are maybe getting more blunt because they're running out of time or the emotional capacity is not there. But I talk about this as well in my podcast, is there's a language issue. And I remember one of the girls saying to me, she'd had a laparoscopic procedure for endo, and the surgeon had done a really horrendous job. She was using a walking stick. She's 25. And she went into another specialist who's a female and looked at the imaging and was like, oh, wow, he butchered you. I was like, whoa, that is a really bad term for a 25-year-old girl who's just had her ovaries, pinned to the walls. She's very open about this, by the way, so it's okay that I say it. But as a doctor, it's I feel like that specialist probably didn't mean to hurt you in that way, but hearing that she said that, I was like, as a patient and now interviewing you in a different seat, that is that's just an example of doctors not thinking before they speak sometimes, which then creates a further power imbalance.
The challenge also is what the patient hears and what the doctor actually says sometimes
is very different.
Is very different. I've seen this many times where I've questioned patients and I said, how did you get that conclusion? Oh, that's what the doctor said. And I'll look at the report and I'll say, that's not what any of this says. So again, you're anxious in an appointment. You've heard something that's maybe like, yes, but a version of what you were being told. There's a lot of variables that I think we don't necessarily consider. We're talking about women specifically at this point in time, but it applies across the board. It's no wonder that there's still this disconnect. It's just many layers just to a consultation.
There's so many factors. Like if we look at, I guess if we talk now more broadly, gender health gap, the fact that women are spending 25% more time in poor health compared to men, so their health span, not lifespan, is shorter than men's. And the conditions that we're disproportionately suffering from compared to men is what contributing to that. So it's 47% of conditions that are not reproductive. So it's like autoimmune, neurological, mental health, musculoskeletal, and 5% are reproductive and maternal. But it's mainly affecting us between 18 to 64 during our working years, which is then impacting the economy. So it's costing us $1 trillion annually. What is causing this is there's three aspects to it. There's a systemic biases, there's the interpersonal biases, and there's the research biases, which is what Ovum's trying to close or at least deal with in some capacity, whether it will probably take decades to get there. But I think what you're talking about is this interpersonal bias, but there's also an overlap, and it's always in a Venn diagram, right, with the systemic impacts or biases that then impact the interpersonal biases, and actually the research biases then also impact the interpersonal biases because like how doctors are being trained. But it also impacts the systemic biases because our system's set up wrong because we don't have good research on women. And it's these factors that are consistently interplaying with one another. But if you look at actually the World Economic Forum are now working with McKinsey to track, it's called the Women's Health Tracking Platform, where they're looking at how we're closing each of these and the economic costs on it. It's really, really interesting. It's a very easy report. It's very visual. But for us at Ovum, when we're looking at impact, we're looking at what are we doing to address each of these three facets of the gender health gap, which, I guess for us, it's looking at, okay, Ovum is hopefully a safe and non-judgmental space. Women can learn and talk about their health. That is the interpersonal biases piece. So then measuring, are we helping women advocate for themselves? Are we helping women understand their bodies? In recent customer surveys, like we're doing really, really well. We're seeing, I think it was we've just had 15 women in our first kind of little bucket. But it was 67% said that, being able to advocate for themselves so much better using Ovum. There's around 80% had said it helped them understand their bodies better. And then some of the kind of qualitative pieces of information was within 3 weeks of using Ovum, I had direct impacts on my mental health. I had one woman write on her LinkedIn a poem to herself, to her 10-year-old self, about the impacts of the healthcare system and how Ovum was the best birthday gift to herself and her daughter. And so this is like an emotional resonance and this sense of confidence I could feel amongst women sharing stories that are vulnerable, but it's in an empowered way. So that's kind of that interpersonal bias piece. And then systemic bias is the integration. So the fact that we're integrating medical reports, we're integrating biometric data, we're integrating appointment and medication data and all your reproductive data in one place. So then looking at what we'll be able to look at after, a few months of data collection is how are we piecing that together in a way that's useful? And then how are we partnering with clinics and making the patient experience more seamless? And then the research piece, again, this will probably take a bit longer, is we're actually creating an AI that will structure unstructured medical data in a way that's useful for researchers. So eventually we'll have a dashboard where a researcher from a women's health organisation will go in and say, I'm interested in women in this age, this region, this ethnicity, with this past medical history and on this medication, and use that aggregated anonymous data to improve women's health research and hopefully translate to medications and treatments. And we'll be looking at that over time.
That's exciting. I think the research part of it is especially exciting because obviously it's lacking.
Yes. And we have decades to catch up on.
Yes.
Yeah. Decades. So we need, and that's where AI is really powerful.
Yeah.
It's faster than humans. If we just only relied on us doing clinical trials and research in the way we're doing it, I'm doing that right now. It is slow. By the time you get through ethics and anytime you need to change anything, you're doing another ethics application, it's like with ends up being like a few hundred women. we need this on a mass, and that's what we hope we can do.
Before we end, I do want to touch on the AI side of it because a lot of people are very afraid of it. What would you say to the person that's listening going, I ain't touching anything that's to do with AI? I mean, I think it's inevitable. It's everywhere and they're probably already touching things that are using AI. How would you put that person's mind at rest, especially with the use of your app or platform, I should say?
So I think when we look at like what people are scared of with AI, I think it's around hallucinations. So that's making up information when it doesn't know it. Privacy. So where's it taking that data? What's it doing? Liability. So if it says the wrong thing, what's the legal implications, especially in medicine? The way I look at it is when you're ever using an AI product, look at how that AI product is mitigating these things. So we look at hallucinations. Ovum has developed our own knowledge library. It's called Retrieval Augmented Generation System. You might hear it become more, colloquial. I can't say that. You might want to cut that.
You did well.
I tried. You might hear it more often, which is RAG. And so we've based that off Australian clinical guidelines. So Ovum's not even accessing the global internet. It's accessing a trained data set, and then it's accessing this. So if it ever doesn't know, it's always got the clinical guidelines there. And that's been, with medical students, myself, and with clinicians all working on that. And we're building an AI evaluation tool where we're constantly testing clinical cases and improving our memory and the ability for it to answer clinical questions. And that will change for different markets. Then we look at privacy. So the biggest concern is like whatever AI server you're using, how are you protecting my data? So first of all, we're SOC 2 and GDPR. That means we're nationally and globally compliant with privacy standards. We don't want to know who you are. We don't collect personal identifying information. So when you upload a medical report, you can redact anything you don't want uploaded. We have Face ID. We collect first name, not full name. We collect year of birth, not date of birth. Ethnicity and regions, all optional. In fact, anything you put in is really optional. And the way we store the data is encrypted and aggregated. So we actually don't know who you are. Even your emails, which your account is stored separately. Also with a lot of these AI servers, with any AI application that's using them, they have to delete any data within 30 days. And unless you opt in, they can't use that data for training. Thirdly, medical liability. So with Ovum, we're very clear about our communication. And when you are signing your terms and conditions, whether that's with privacy and with using the app in a, medical advisory way, the limitations of that. And I think it's about understanding the limitations of AI, whether that's using Ovum or whether that's using ChatGPT, should always be used as an advisor to give you the information, but it should never in a medical setting be used as a doctor. We're very clear about that. So, when you do sign terms and conditions with Ovum, you are agreeing that you do understand that. Most people, I hope, and when I've spoken to them in our customer surveys and interviews, is actually I never even thought about it like that, actually. So, I've gone as a doctor assuming that women might use it in that way, but actually now that they're using it, it's come back, well, I never was going to use it in that way. But I think it's, with a lot of these new health AI and companions, especially in mental health as well, you need to be really careful around that. And actually Ovum won't talk about, it will talk about, but it will very much not close the conversation, but let you know when it's out of bounds.
I mean, I think we can't compare Ovum with ChatGPT. Like that's the wild, wild west. And what you've created is very curated. Any of those other types are sort of free for all. Who knows where it's pulling the info from. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This has been awesome. For anyone who wants to find out more, they can go to askovum.com.
Yes.
I've got it up on my screen here. You're here. I'm looking at you on the screen.
Yes, I know.
That's so much.
I know. We ran the campaigns. This is our first campaign called The Movement. We have 5 women, all different ethnicities, health backgrounds, ages, mixture of influencers, advocates, investors, journalists. And the whole idea, this is part of our launch campaign, was they all shared their story and then linked it back to how Ovum could have changed that or helped them. And they're on all, you'll see them throughout our social media, but when we're doing the shoot, they're like, no, you have to be part of it because you are one of us.
It's pretty cute though.
It's really cute. And you'll see I'm throughout, but I took a lot of convincing to get me there. But actually,
I think it's really important actually that you're there.
I'm part of it. And I see myself as equal and as going through the journey that all of these women have, and all the women who use Ovum probably will have had.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. I can see that this is going to have such a big impact on women, and
hope so.
Thank you for being the visionary.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And thank you for such just really thoughtful and really good questions. I really enjoyed the conversation.